Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. I am looking forward to our conversation with Whitney today. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm very excited to chat with you. I'm just going to roll into your bio real quick for our listeners.
Okay.
Whitney Bischoff Angel is a nurse and women's health educator at OVA Egg Freezing Specialty Center and has over 15 years of experience in the field of reproductive medicine. With this expertise, Whitney has made the personal decision in 2013 to freeze her own eggs, which she credits for making her an even stronger fertility nurse. She is passionate about helping women achieve their fertility goals while empowering them to take control of their reproductive health. She has appeared on ABC's Nightline, Good Morning America, Extra, Windy City Live, been in People Magazine, US Weekly, E-Online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome again. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me. I'm really excited to just dive into such an important topic.
Me too. So one reason that I'm so excited because you are a fertility nurse now as your job.
I am, yeah. And I have been a fertility nurse for almost the last 16 years. But, as part of my role now, I kind of, worked in all aspects of fertility health, but work more so now on fertility preservation.
Which if anybody who's gone through a fertility journey, you know that the nurses are your BFFs through this process, which is why I'm so excited. Yes, which is why I'm so excited to talk to you because they are our first line of communication most of the time of our day-to-day questions about what's happening. And when I say day-to-day, I literally mean that. It's every other day that you're having something go on or whatnot. So the fertility nurses hold such a near and dear place in our hearts because they are such a huge part of the journey. So thank you for doing what you do in the clinic and all of those things because it is such an important role to play because I feel like it's part therapist, part nurse, part best friend, all the things. And it's a lot, I imagine, right? I mean,
but it's extremely rewarding. And, I would say that when I was working in the fertility clinic and working with patients and kind of being that touch point for them, as you mentioned, their therapist, their friend, their nurse, I think that my patients at that time helped me make the decision to freeze my eggs. So I feel like they inspired me and helped me hopefully as much as I helped them. And that was because so many times I would be talking with women that were struggling to conceive or had found out that they needed to use a donor egg. And then they would always tell me, I wish I would have frozen my eggs. I wish I would have had that opportunity. And for me, that helped me make the decision to move forward with fertility preservation.
And I just realized I also froze my eggs in 2013.
So you did.
Yes.
We were just, before kind of the crowd started doing it. It was kind of ahead of our time.
For sure. It wasn't super popular or something that everyone was talking about at happy hour like they are now.
Yeah, exactly. And thank goodness they are doing that now.
Yes, which I'm so happy that that's the case. So in that, it's more widely talked about and done, so to speak. Do you see now with what you're doing specific to egg preservation, do you see a sort of trend of where I'm going to generalize that it's younger women rather than not that older women aren't doing it, but mostly younger, that they're doing it because they either don't know if they want to have children or they're still single, or is there some sort of trend that you see in the office there of like, oh, wow, pretty much everybody's this, or what do you see there? I'm just curious.
So I think it has evolved with time. When we first started seeing the influx of women coming in to freeze their eggs, they were, typically in their late 30s, early 40s, and we're kind of having this, oh crap moment,
Mhm.
Now, though, as we're seeing the age trend downward, but we're still wishing that we could reach women even a little bit younger, because we know that success is impacted by the age at which, you freeze eggs. But I also see the reason for freezing eggs has widened. It's broadened. There's so many reasons to freeze your eggs. I think the biggest question would be, why wouldn't you? So I think that there's a lot of women that we see that are going to be in graduate school, are, law students or med students, or know that they have, many years of schooling in front of them. So they want to, preserve their fertility. We have others that are just more free spirits, want to travel the world. Some people are in relationships, but just know that nothing is a guarantee. So are being proactive in that sense. There's just so many reasons to do it. And I love that not every two patients are the same.
Absolutely. I also want to kind of demystify for some people that it's this big, not undertaking's the right word, but they think if I go to freeze my eggs, it's going to be super painful and it's going to be this long drawn out process and, all the things. And I say, like, if I could do it by myself as a single girl, you can do it by yourself as a single girl and or in a relationship or whatever. Do you find the one thing I will say is the mixing of the drugs and doing all that sort of stuff, not being a nurse, I say this to people all the time. Like, I feel like we're not qualified to be doing this, but yet we're doing it. And so again, if you feel that way, know that millions of women have also done it. You can also do it. And, there's people that are willing to help you. The nurses are, of
Oh,
course,
absolutely.
talking to people all the time to do that. But do you find that there's one thing that maybe people are hesitant about with, like, maybe, I'm too scared to do this either because of the needles or because of the time frame or
Yeah, I
something
mean,
like that?
I think, in Chicago specifically, where OVA is located, we don't get a lot of summer. So I feel as the weather starts to change, that's probably one of the biggest hesitations, is because a lot of times people don't
Interesting.
want to feel maybe a little bloated or have that temporary sort of water retention that sometimes happens
Mhm.
when it's the summer months. So we tend to see that as kind of being, one of the reasons somebody might say, I'm not really excited to do this right now when the weather's starting to warm up. It's a time commitment. It's never going to be a good time to freeze your eggs, right? No one's just sitting on their couch and being like, I can't wait to do this. But the feeling of satisfaction once it's done, is what you're doing it for, is to
Right.
say, I've done this, it's behind me. I can now sort of move forward and not have to have this, weighing on me. I would say there are obviously women that no one's excited to give themselves injections. I've done this too, and even as a nurse, that was something that was anxiety provoking to me. I think the unknown of the whole experience is probably the most daunting.
Right.
Just not knowing how you're going to respond, not knowing how the shots are going to make you feel or the side effects or what the outcome's going to be. But once we tackle that big unknown, that big fear, which we all have in different aspects of our life, I think it becomes more manageable. And I think that's why getting in front of it and just saying, okay, we're laying everything out here. This is what your reserve looks like. This is what your protocol is going to look like. And having that just, support from your nurses in your clinic is the most important.
And do you generally find that people have to do more than one round? Like, do you guys at where you are try to get to a minimum amount for people to retrieve, or how does that work? Is it, do you kind of leave it to everyone teach their own of what they feel good about? How does that usually work?
That's a really great question, and one that we also want to get in front of. Now, ultimately, it's the patient's decision how they want to move forward. But as experts in the field, we would be doing our patients a disservice if we did not explain to them, what is going to be the best way to set themselves up for success. So the number of eggs that a woman freezes is solely based on her age, because that's what's going to base, the quality of them off of. So when you're younger, you don't have to freeze as many as when you're older, which is a perk of doing it when you're younger. But unfortunately, as we get older, we know the drop off rate is going to be higher if and when you come to use the eggs, because quality is going to play a role. So you're going to need to freeze more, which ultimately means that you're going to need more than one cycle. I think it's tough with women that are so goal oriented, so type A, or coming to be proactive and freezing their eggs, and you tell them you might need to do this more than once, because to them, a lot of times they relate that to failure. And it's not at all. It's very, very common that women, as we get to be in our mid 30s, even in our early 30s, may need to do more than one cycle. But believe me, you'd rather do that now versus finding out down the line that when you're coming back to use the eggs that you don't have enough.
Right. And the one thing that I always try to educate people on too is what is the process after they're frozen?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they go into it, well, I froze my eggs, I'm good until I need them later, but not really thinking of what does that look like later, right?
Mm-hmm.
That looks like the thaw, et cetera, et cetera. So can you walk our audience through what that is exactly so that they have that expectation of another reason why they may want to do another cycle to get a little bit more because of the multiple process that goes.
Yeah. So if we think of IVF, so in vitro fertilization, as a big circle, what egg freezing is that first half, but we still have to come back to complete it. So there is still that second half of the process that is, very important. It's not as time consuming, and we have a little bit more of control on it because it's not based just on your body's response. But there is a lot of expertise that comes into play with the laboratory, which is very important when you're looking at who you're working with, because there's thaw rates and there's fertilization with the sperm, and then we grow things into embryos. And eggs are not as easy to handle as embryos. Embryos are sturdier than eggs. So it's important that you understand that the facility that you're going to has experience with thawing, not only freezing, but thawing eggs, and has babies born from eggs frozen in their laboratory.
Versus embryos. I just want to point that
Yeah,
out again. So the
yeah,
thaw, having a live birth from a thaw of a frozen egg versus a live birth from a thaw of a frozen embryo.
correct. It's much different. Yeah,
Mhm.
and many facilities can freeze and thaw embryos very well. It's much different when it comes to the egg, just because of how fragile the egg is in comparison to an embryo. An embryo has all the chromosomes that it needs, right? So when I always talk to patients, I like to say, if you think of an embryo as walking steadily on 2 feet, an
Mhm.
egg is limping on one. It's only half of that. So it's easier messed with. You could easily push it over. It could easily fall down and get hurt, right? So
Mhm.
that's how we think of it, when we're working with the eggs, is that they're very, very fragile, and it's a very fine-tuned technology to work with them.
Yeah. I always say if people are open to it, freeze some eggs and some embryos in case you need them later. Um, in fact, I have one, she's 45, that is now married. I wasn't at the time, but she had 3 years ago did a sperm donor with her her egg retrieval because she was single at the time, and kind of took that advice, and her current husband are now using that embryo because she wasn't able to get any successful on her current rounds of IVF. So she's so grateful that she had that ability, because none of her frozen eggs thawed either, which was what had happened for us as well out of my.
Yeah, and I think as time has gone on, right, the success has gotten better, right?
Right.
Because, it
Technology.
used to be, I would say that if someone came in and said, I'm interested in preserving my fertility, it would be more recommended to freeze an embryo versus an egg. But that's not always the case now. And as more women are becoming younger and younger and doing this, the success rates between eggs and embryos in OVA's lab is only, by a few percentage points.
Right.
So to be
Mhm.
able to then have the choice of down the line saying, a choice of who you want the sperm
Yeah.
donor
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be is obviously, going to be in your best interest. But, for those that are in relationships, or, are ready to have a baby now, an embryo is also, or donor sperm and embryo is also an option.
Yeah. Again, the percentage that Whitney points out really is so minimal now compared to what it was
Yes.
even 5 years ago, which is great. But I think if you can do both and you're open to that, not knowing what your future holds, I think it's always an extra. Again, maybe I'm biased from my own experience, but but I think it's all good information. Another thing that you pointed out was the feeling that people have. Can you explain, if somebody's on the fence about maybe going down the road of freezing their eggs, what literally happens with their body? What will their body be feeling and doing during that process?
So essentially, what happens in a natural menstrual cycle is a woman's ovary is recruiting a group or cohort of immature eggs to the surface. And one of those naturally breaks away from the packs, grows and matures, and is ovulated out for pregnancy. What we're doing with egg freezing is you're administering hormones via injection to help more than one of those eggs pull away or break away from the pack. So, with that, you are going to have some growth of the ovary. You're going to have growth of follicles, which is the house of the egg. And you're going to have some cramping and fluid retention and things of that nature. Now, it's not overnight. It's not like you give yourself your first night of shots and you wake up the next day and think, oh my gosh, I'm so bloated. It's more of on a bell curve. It's more of a gradual sort of increase, with the peak of the side effects typically being about the day after retrieval. And then it slowly dissipates. That's the other, I think, common misconception is, I'm going to have a retrieval. These eggs are going to be out and I'm going to feel amazing tomorrow. No, not necessarily. It takes some time. Those hormones need to regulate. Your ovaries slowly are going to go back down to that normal size. And things, you'll feel better once you get your period after the retrieval. But, we somewhat want you to feel a little crampy, bloated, right? Because it's letting us know you're responding to the medications. Your ovaries are doing what they're supposed to do. And that leads me to another misconception of, are you taking eggs from a future bank? By freezing my eggs, am I impacting my chances of getting pregnant naturally in the future? And the answer is no. Because again, you're losing eggs every single month that are recruited to the ovary, and we're essentially saving eggs that you would have lost anyway.
Awesome. And what about increasing the quality of those eggs that you currently have? What do you guys think about that? As far as, when I was going through it, there was no talk about like anything you could do, say, eat or supplement that was going to help impact any of the cells necessarily. What's your opinion on, people that are doing these egg cycles to say, okay, I did this one, I'm going to wait 120, 50 or 150 days to see if we get any increase on better quality eggs?
So we know that egg quality and quantity is always going down. We cannot change science. It is always going down. Now, to reverse that effect is impossible, right? But there's things that we can do that can help support egg quality, although it's very hard to quantify. So there's supplements and things that we can recommend taking. And many women will say, because we know, like if you want to get the peak effects, typically it's 3 months before you go through a treatment cycle, that, you would take a supplement, or you would do something like acupuncture to really help nourish and, have blood flow to the ovaries. And yes, that may give us a little bit of a boost, but what we know impacts fertility and quantity and quality is time. So there is this fine line of, do I take more time in between to do supplements and do acupuncture, knowing that time could take, could impact my fertility? Or do I maybe do simultaneously take some supplements and do some acupunctures while I'm going through with treatment, so that the effects of time aren't going to impact my reserve or quality as well?
Right. And I think that's the unfortunate part of this situation, right? Is time is not our friend. So as much as we want to think that whatever age you feel in your mind, right? The reality is your body is that age, and the chronological age of yourself and your cells, as much as you can be healthy and whatnot, the reality is you don't want to be waiting till you're, like I did, 40 years old. I got very fortunate, but that's not the norm. So I think sometimes people think, oh, well, Elizabeth had 3 kids naturally over 40. Yes, but realistically, that's not super common. So I want to just encourage people, either freezing your eggs at whatever young age you can, and or deciding what you're going to do, because it really does impact the journey of what that looks like for you. I had losses. You're less likely to have losses if you start younger. Not that we don't see people with losses that are younger. So I also want to make that clear. But your age is your age, and the cells of your body, including the mitochondria in your eggs, also reflect that.
And that's, you brought up a really good point, especially with egg freezing. When you freeze your eggs, let's say your 30-year-old freezes her eggs and she chronologically, is getting older, her eggs will always stay that quality of a 30-year-old. So when a woman who's 40, maybe she comes back to use her eggs, she will have the success of a 30-year-old that would be going through IVF, not a 40-year-old.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Yes.
So let's talk about your egg freezing process in 2013. How did that go? What did that result in? I know you have 2 little ones now. Are they a product of that? Tell us about your story.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was working in the fertility clinic and made the decision to freeze my eggs in 2013. I was 27 at the time. So, I was young, which obviously benefited me, but the science was still somewhat new. I was lucky that I was working with a laboratory and with a physician that had good experience with egg freezing, but it was still somewhat in its infancy. So my process, I feel it went smooth. I stimulated fine. I think back on it. Gosh, it was so long ago. I don't feel like there was any points within my stimulation period or treatment that were so awful that they stuck out in my mind, right? But I was able to retrieve 17 eggs, and out of those 17, 15 of them were mature and frozen. My life continued to kind of go on its crazy path, which it does for everybody, twists and turns. And that's the one thing that I always thought was my constant, is that I had my eggs. It was always something I was so relieved that I had done. And throughout the years, of all the women that I've worked with and spoken with, I've never heard of one person say, I regret freezing my eggs, whether they've used them or they didn't. I did end up getting married and was ready. We were ready to start our family, almost immediately. And I needed to take some of my own advice because, as a woman, when you're trying to conceive, when it doesn't happen that first month, you're like, why? What's wrong with me? Why is this not working? And the truth of the matter is that naturally every single month, the odds are against you, even when you're young and fertile. It's crazy. So I was, growing impatient after like the second or third month, and I was less than 35. So the recommendation is when you're less than 35, you should be trying to achieve pregnancy, for a year before you seek help. And then if you're older than 35, it would be reduced to 6 months. But here I was, less than 35, 2 months in. I'm calling up Dr. Brian Kaplan, who I worked with, and I'm like, okay, do I need to use my eggs? And it was this, okay, let's take a deep breath here. Let's focus on, what we know to be true. And let's give it, a little bit more time, because the fact was I knew I wanted more than one child. So I didn't want to make, a very quick decision to use those eggs. And then obviously with time, as we know, of not being our friend, fertility continues to go down. And then I would be in a big pickle down the line for baby number 2. So we ended up conceiving naturally eventually, and then time continued to go on. Here we go. We're ready to get pregnant with baby number 2, but surprise, I got hit with a very unexpected health crisis. And I don't think that people think about that. When it's another reason to freeze your eggs, is you don't know what's going to happen to you, a family member, a global pandemic, whatever it may be, that is going to impact your ability to get pregnant, not just from a reproductive standpoint, but just from a general well-being and health standpoint. So at that time, I decided I wanted to thaw my eggs and fertilize them to see what I was working with. And we did do that. And we had, a great result based off of what I had. It was 15 eggs. They all were able to survive the thaw. I think 12 of them fertilized, 10 made to embryos. We sent off for genetic testing, and I had 5 healthy embryos. So we did proceed with the transfer. Unfortunately, the first one was not successful. We were prepping for another, and I got pregnant naturally.
Oh, amazing.
So I still have embryos that I may need for baby number 3. And I think that's something that many people also don't think about, is that a lot of women use their eggs not for baby number 1, but for baby number 2 or baby number 3,
Right.
which is, that secondary infertility.
Right. And I think too, as you kind of alluded to before, you just have this sense of, even different than an insurance policy, but like, I'm good with how I navigate my life in a little bit of a different way, because you know that there is that safety net, so to speak, right? And
Yes.
that goes a long way for a young woman with a career or traveling, or just, feeling like they want to go a different path than generations before us did, which was, okay, you're coming to this age, you need to hurry up, find the husband, get pregnant, and whatever right now, because it's
Mm-hmm.
time is fading away. When you did it at 27, and again, it wasn't something that people were talking about. Were you open with your group of friends that you were doing it at that time? Did people know you
I
were
love
doing
this
this?
question. I love this question. I was,
Okay.
because I'm sure it will be no surprise to anyone. I will talk to anyone that will listen. So I was telling them, about everything. And I got so many critiques, so many people
Hmm.
being like, why are you doing that? You're young, almost looking at me like it was an act of desperation. Where in my mind, I was like, isn't this so amazing that as women, we can do this? Like, I was thinking it was so empowering. And my
Yeah.
girlfriends at the time were like, why would you put your body through that? And, you're young, you're going to meet somebody.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest kind of eye-opening experience was fast forward down the line, some of my biggest critics became patients.
Right. Yeah,
And it's interesting how life works, right?
for
But
sure.
I just knew from the get-go when this started, when we started to hear about egg freezing and it was gaining momentum, this was going to be a game changer, for all women, that in the future. And I
Right.
really feel like it's paved the way. This should be just a common thing that's talked about. You go in for your annual and let's talk about freezing your eggs.
For
And
sure.
some women, it may not be a good choice for them, and that's okay. But I think giving a woman an option to make that, educated decision for herself, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I always tell people too, I was not somebody who was burning yearning to be a mom. It was just like, I
Mhm.
had my 401k, I froze my eggs. Like, it was just kind of one of those things that was the responsible thing to do. Cause like you, I
Mhm.
had people that I had worked with that were talking about their own struggles, and I had gotten divorced at 30. And so, I went then, and the doctor was like, at that time, the technology wasn't great. He's like, come back
Mhm.
later. You're still young. Let's see how it goes later. So I knocked again at 36, like, okay, I'm here again. He's like, okay, we
Yes.
can do it now.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that just knowing that you have that changes the way that you show up in the world as a woman
Mhm.
too, of
Mhm.
saying that I took this power and I know that a lot of people are concerned that they don't have the money to do it. There are so many insurance companies and businesses now that are employers that cover it. They may
Mhm.
not shout off the rooftops that they cover it, because obviously that could be costing them a lot of money, but look into your HR department and see, do they have anything that, whether they cover a portion of it or the full amount of it, because you would be surprised now how many people are offering it as a service, and or start saving for it if it's something that you're kind of curious to, or you think maybe you'd want to do down the road. I think people also have this misconception that it's way more expensive than it actually is. And not to say that it's cheap, but it's attainable if you
Mhm.
put it out as an intention of, this is something that's important to me and my future, and I want to do this. Just like if you're making a budget for anything else, include that
Mhm.
in it. I just cannot express enough how important it is to think about that ahead of time, so that you can secure a portion of your future to make it a little easier for you.
Absolutely, and you are so right. I mean, thankfully, more and more insurance companies are signing on to help with that. There's like Progeny, there's Carrot, there's Maven. But if your company does not, think about just asking them, would you be open to adding some sort of benefit on? Because it's going to ultimately benefit both the employer and the employee.
Right. And they're wising up to that because they're the employee retention that they get with the younger generation, right? Of like, if you don't offer it, I'm going to go somewhere else who does because it's important to them. And they're having these conversations that they want to do it. So I'm excited about that. Well, how can people follow you and find you and get more information about all your story?
Yeah, so OVA is where I work, and we are located in Chicago, but we see patients from all over. So if you're interested or want some more information on OVA, you can follow us on Instagram, which is at ovaeggfreezing.com. And you can also email us, DM us, all of that fun stuff. And we're always happy to, help you out, answer any questions that you may have. My personal journey is at Whitney_B_Angel. I post mostly just about my family and my kids on there, which it just is, sometimes I got to pinch myself. I feel really lucky to be where I am now.
I know when you talk about like getting pregnant naturally and the statistics of that, I remember my fertility doctor telling me, I'm like, it's like, it really is a miracle that it happens as often as it does with the like realization of what needs to happen to get to that point. So I couldn't agree with you more. It really is a blessing. Well, thank you for your time today. Thanks for being here and educating everyone on egg freezing and telling your story. And I can't wait till we cross our paths again.
I love it. Thank you for the opportunity. It's an important, topic just to continue to shed light on and really educate women everywhere on.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.